stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is Kill the Newsletter. We are going to be writing some HTML and CSS today. We are going to start the user interface for the new version of Kill the Newsletter. Most of the existing user interface will be maintained because I kind of like it. It is simple enough. It's such a simple app. It doesn't require a complicated interface. But we will revisit the structure of how I define the user interface, because I was using my library. I'm going to continue using my library, but my library has changed over time, and there are things that are done differently now. There are things that are done better, I would say. So anyway, we are going to be looking at user interfaces and my libraries. Actually, libraries, there are multiple of them. And we are going to be looking at how to use these libraries to do a user interface. Now, I have to confess that it has been kind of a while since I worked on this project. 1 or 2 weeks have passed. And I am trying this new thing in which I go to different projects in different coding sessions, which is good because I can cover more ground. I can talk about HTML and CSS. And the other day I'm talking about some digital signal processing, and then the other day I'm talking about data bending. So all these things that interest me, I'm covering all of them. But the downside is that every time I go to a project, I'm like, what the heck is going on here again? Where did I leave this? What's the next step? I don't remember. And we are going to find out together. First of all, I believe we got to a point in which if I just try to start, things are going to start. It's not going to like fail. Oh well. But this is kind of okay, because that was probably the first thing I was going to do anyway. The problem here is that I installed dependencies, including this package, using one version of Node.js. And since then, I updated the version of Node.js. So it is kind of neat that we ran into this error, because it allows me to explain some interesting things I learned about Node.js. And if this becomes one of those streams in which I explain a lot of things and I talk a lot and don't write a lot of code, I'm fine with that. As long as you're having fun and I'm having fun, it's all good. So here's this issue that you may run into if you work with Node.js. The issue is there are some packages like this one that require some extensions written in C and C++. In this case, it is a database driver and SQLite is implemented in C. So this needs to be compiled with a C compiler. In fact, SQLite itself is written in C. Better SQLite 3, the driver for SQLite, is written in C++. And that's something called a native dependency. And the thing about native dependencies is that they create this .node file that works like a node module in the sense that you can import this into your Node.js code. But this was written in C or C++ and compiled down to this. And when you're writing these native extensions, you can write at least in 2 different ways. There may be more ways of doing this, but there are at least 2 different ways. The first way is this, and that's the more modern way, and it is probably the recommended way to get started. If you can get by using this way, you should use it. It's the so-called Node API, or I guess in some cases it's abbreviated to an API. And this is an API in C, I think. I'm almost positive that this is defined in, yeah, it is defined in C. There are some wrappers for C++ in this package if you want to use C++. But it's a C API at the lowest level. And the thing about this API is that it is abstract. It does not give you all the power you would need to tweak all the inner workings of Node.js, but it is more stable. So they say here in the documentation that it's a C API and it is stable across Node.js versions and different compiler levels. What this means is that you can compile some native extension using this API to be used with Node 18, and then Node 19 comes along and your .node file will be compatible and you can just continue using it. That's the first way and the more modern way and the recommended way of using or developing a native extension for Node.js. The second way is the more traditional way, the older way. It is this C++ add-ons. And these give you more control, give you a lower level API, and give you access to the components that make up Node.js. So this is the JavaScript engine that runs JavaScript in Node.js. This is the library that does almost everything you would want to do in Node.js, like networking, accessing file systems and whatnot. And it allows you to do all that asynchronously, which is, of course, at the heart of Node.js. So this gives you a lot more control. The downside is that this API is more difficult to use and that it's not ABI compatible across versions of Node.js. What this means is that if you develop a native extension using the C++ add-ons API, the V8 API, the libuv API, if you develop things using this header essentially, right? Because when you're using this API, you include, what is the name of the header? This Node API header in your C or C++ code. On the other hand, if you're including this header, it means that you're using this other interface, the older one, gives you more control, but more difficult to use and not compatible across versions. And guess which kind of API Better SQLite 3 is using? Well, you know the answer. It is the second one. I will show you. See, it's including the node.h file, not the node API.h file. So this is a library that is using this C++ add-ons instead of the Node API. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it is because this new API came along after Better SQLite 3 was already on its way, or if it really needed some lower level controls only provided by this API. I'm not sure what's the case. But what I am sure of, because of this header here, is that it's using this. So it's not compatible across versions of Node. And it shows because I installed the dependencies for my package or for my project. And as I said, a few weeks have passed. And since then, I updated my installation of Node.js. I was probably using Node 18 or something. I don't remember. but I updated my version of Node.js. And then I'm trying to run the project, and it's not working. It needs a version of Better SQLite 3 that has been compiled for Node 19, which is the version that I'm using. In fact, you can see that I am using the latest. And I tend to use the latest. So if you run into this problem, now you know why, and you know what you need to do, because it's telling you. You can just rebuild stuff, or you can npm install, which is going to install the project again, and it will download new binaries, or if binaries are not available, it will try and compile this on your machine and whatnot. So that's what's up. If you have a native extension written using the Node API, you will not run into this problem. If you use the C++ add-ons API, this kind of API, this header, you will run into this kind of problem. And I tend to always be updating my Node.js versions when new versions come along. I use NVM on Mac and Linux, and I use NVM Windows on Windows. They are different projects. So this way I can have multiple installations of Node.js if I need, but I always just run the latest unless there is some compatibility problem that I have to solve. I just run the latest. So now that we know why this is happening and what is the solution, I could just install this again, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to run this task, which will update all the packages, because I have published new versions of some of these dependencies since our last coding session. And I want to get the latest versions of these. And I find that it's always good practice to run this from time to time anyway, so we might as well. And what this is going to do is just get the latest versions of all the packages and install again, run npm install. So it will recompile or re-download the binary for Better SQLite 3, and then hopefully we'll be able to npm start. And it's always nice to look at what has been updated. So as I said, my packages have been updated, but all the other updates have been either minor or patches. So I don't have to worry about having to change my code because it will be compatible, because nothing major has changed. Well, that's underway. Explain.js. Do I have a file called that? No, I don't have a file called that. Or are you just saying that because I'm explaining stuff? By the way, hi M9, hi Nodwas, and hi Bo. Nodwas1. Hello everyone. Yeah, I am doing well. I hope that you're doing well too. How was Christmas, if you celebrate Christmas? How was the other holidays that you may celebrate? How is this end of the year treating you? Right, so what we see here on the terminal, while you're typing in your answers to my questions, what's happening here is that I changed some of my packages in a way that breaks things. We saw that the version number for this package was a major update. But that's okay, because it's my package. We are going to dive in and start using the new package anyway, so it's no big deal. This error is not in the installation. It is right after the installation when it is trying to compile our TypeScript. But our code doesn't work like that anymore. It now looks like this. I changed this into a default import, and I think that that's pretty much all. I ran npm test instead of... Oh, okay. That was not all. Also under here, this now looks like that. And also this looks like this. They are all default imports now. Now this has a chance of working. And it does. And right now, this code is doing a lot already. In previous sessions, we made this code spin up different processes for a reverse proxy. We are using Caddy, and a process for the web interface. In fact, multiple processes for the web interface. We have as many processes as we have cores in our processor. So in my case, I have 8 web processes and 1 process to run the email server. In case you don't know, Kill the Newsletter, it's an app that receives emails and lets you read those emails as an RSS feed. So you can sign up for newsletters using your RSS reader. So we do need an email server to receive those emails, and that's what this kind of process is. So anyway, all the process management is already in place and working. And now our task for today is to start the user interface, because the server is running here on localhost. But if I visit localhost, this is what we get. At least there is a to-do there. I wasn't expecting to see a to-do. I was expecting to see a not found error. Yes, I'm saying because you said you need to explain it. Yeah. Yeah, I could just solve the problem by running the command that the error message told me to run. But what's the fun in that? I spent lots of hours reading into all this history of the different Node APIs, the trade-offs, and other interesting C++ things. Might as well share, right? In fact, there is another thing that is kind of interesting about Better SQLite 3. Oh, come on. Where is the code base for Better SQLite 3? I think I closed it. There's another interesting thing about the way that this library is written. It is not written directly in C++. Well, kind of. It is written in this lazy C++ thing. And in this lazy C++ thing, you define this .lzz file, and you use these things that look like preprocessor macros, but aren't really, to define a header file. And then you can, I guess, insert stuff, which is kind of an include, but at the lazy C++ level. And then you can use this other kind of macro. It looks like a macro, but it isn't really, because it's like a preprocessor before the preprocessor. And what this allows you to do is write a single file that this lazy C++ compiler will turn into a proper C++ header file and a proper C++ source file. And then from there, you fire the rest of the build system. So it's like a preprocessor that allows you to write C++ in a single file and yet have headers separate from source files for all the reasons you would want that kind of thing. So I thought it was kind of an interesting decision to use this lazy C++ thing. And I think it's written in Lua, which ties back to RIA scripts, which we all love. So that's kind of nice. Anyhow, let's go to this, which is where we are serving our to-do message, and bring in some infrastructure to do a page that will pretty much look like this, where we say what we are, we give you a form, some links at the bottom. That's what we're building today. It's nothing incredible. And I think I will continue using here this little logo of sorts. I will continue using this. I like it. It's okay. So let's recreate this, and let's recreate this in 2 parts. There will be this page, and there will be that page, where where you go to after you have submitted the form. These pages share something. They share the header, the logo, the footer. Just this middle part is different. So we are going to recreate this page using a layout for the things that are shared. And then this middle section here will be on our separate place. And we will be using my library to do this. Let me show you how this works. First, we are going to have a layout. And the layout, when you're using my library, you know what the layout is? It is a function. So my library allows you to define HTML and CSS right in your code, following the principle of locality and following the style that you find in things like React, Svelte. The difference is that it's not another language on top of JavaScript. It's not JSX, it's not Svelte. It's just using tagged template literals and taking them to their full power, to the full extent of things you can do with tagged template literals, which are these little things here. This is actually a function call with the backticks, and the backticks are going to be a string, as you will see. Now, what's cool about this is that it's just JavaScript, so all your existing tools work, all your existing preconceptions are valid. And what's more, I measured, and this tagged template literal approach is, I think, 3 times faster than using something like React and then using the React server DOM and compiling into a string. So because this is so bare bones, it does everything I needed to do, and it's much faster, which is great because the more I am getting into measurements and performance and profiling, the more I learn that the expensive stuff is the rendering. The database is fast. Business rules, super fast. The things that happen on the server, super fast. Now, compiling this, rendering this user interface, rendering, essentially concatenating these strings, that's expensive. As surprising as it may sound, it was surprising to me anyway. I'm getting the imports out of the way because I know off the top of my head the things that I will need. Now with the imports out of the way, let's actually give types to all these parameters. So in terms of parameters, I don't expect to have any. In terms of body, it will be HTML. So I guess I forgot one parameter. Or one import, I should say. Forgot one import. Then in terms of request body, I don't expect to have anything. Request the query parameters, same story. In terms of locals, I expect to have some locals. But I don't know what they are yet, so I'll just leave it like that. Then in terms of response, the response body will be HTML, and the response locals are these. In terms of head, this will be HTML, and the body will be HTML as well. Now, the beauty of using these text template literals, as I said, is that you can reuse all the existing knowledge of how to do things in JavaScript. So the layout is a piece of markup, it's a piece of HTML that I want to be able to reuse. How do I reuse stuff in JavaScript? There are many abstractions to allow you to reuse stuff, but the most basic one is the function. So you can just do a function, as simple as that. You don't have to think in terms of a framework to come up with abstractions. And I find that empowering because you can get from nothing to something really quickly when you're learning. Now, what I will actually put here in the layout is I'm probably going to just borrow stuff from my day job because most of it is not super interesting. I can probably copy and paste and get out of here quickly. But let's take a look at what I copied. So we have here a doc type. This is necessary because you want to tell the browser that you're using a modern version of HTML. It's kind of opt-in because of all the millions of pages that are legacy. Anyway, this language is kind of required. Then in the head, I will have the application version here in the head for reasons that will become apparent much later in the process, I think. Then in terms of description, we'll do this, which is also what we have on the package.json, yes. Then the viewport. The viewport is actually something that I need to explain. Explain.js. I will need to explain this. Also, it's great that you use VS Code. I find it easy to use and powerful. Yeah, same here. I have a love story with Visual Studio Code, actually. I like it a lot. Probably because I spend most of my time on Earth looking at it. But I really think it's very well engineered, and the thing I like about it the most is exactly what you mentioned. It is easy to use, and it is easy to use out of the box. I do use some extensions, but for the most part, I don't customize stuff. It works so well. Could I customize stuff to make it my own? I suppose. What's the point? It already works so well. I better spend my time developing stuff, I guess. Anyway, this viewport tag needs to be explained. First of all, this is kind of bog standard. You will see this in almost every website. And the reason is, if you don't include this, on the phone, the website will look like the desktop website. If you don't include this, it will be a tiny little website all the way out, zoomed out, and you have to zoom into things. In our application, because the design is so simple, it may not matter, but typically you want to have this stuff because when you define this, you're sort of opting into responsive design. What you're saying is the width of the viewport should be the width of the device. So you should not be looking at a tiny web page zoomed out because the width of the viewport is the width of the device. You don't have to be zoomed out. And the initial scale is 1. You don't want it to be zoomed out. And this is something that you find in most websites these days. I still don't understand why it is a meta tag instead of being part of your CSS, but it is what it is. And then this is the controversial part. It's something that I came up with myself, and I don't see any downsides, but it's debatable. But that's how I'm doing things, and no one has complained so far. So what this does is, it solves a problem on the phone, at least in iOS. You may have never noticed this, but anytime you go to any website in Safari and you click or you tap in a text box, any kind of text field like this one, Safari zooms in ever so slightly. And the edges of the page are no longer occupying the edges of the viewport. You're sort of zooming in ever so slightly. And that's okay, I guess, especially because it is the default behavior. Most websites do this because most websites don't do anything about it. So probably users are used to it. Not the biggest deal, but it feels a bit off to me. I prefer the more app-like experience in which you tap on a text box and you receive the keyboard on screen to type stuff, but it doesn't zoom in. In apps, text fields don't zoom in. So what this does is tell iOS that you don't want iOS to zoom in. In theory, if you go read up on the documentation for this online, it will tell you that it disallows the user from zooming in at all, not only in the context of focusing on a text box, but in general, which is kind of interesting because what if you cannot read from a distance? Or what if the text is too small? Or what if you want to look into an image in more detail? You would want to pinch and zoom in. In theory, this would disallow that. In practice, iOS ignores this. iOS says, no, I don't care what you're saying. I will allow my user to zoom in. But at the same time, it disables that default behavior of text boxes. It does not zoom into the text box by default anymore. And I find that that's excellent because it gives you that more app-like experience. If you want to zoom in, you can still pinch to zoom. And maybe in other devices, you wouldn't be able to pinch to zoom because other devices will abide by this completely. But I don't know. I haven't really seen a downside to this. And it solves a problem, a nitpicky problem, but a problem nevertheless. So that's why I have the maximum scale. Explain.js. Now for the theme colors, this is a Safari thing again on the phone and on desktop. I'm not sure I can open this. Can I open this? Yes, I can. So you see how this bar on the top is yellow? Previously it was black and now it's yellow. You can use this meta tag to define the color of the Safari bar. And I suppose that maybe other browsers will follow suit in the future. And I did this in CourseLore because I wanted to have different accent colors for different courses. But in Q the newsletter, I don't think we need that feature. I cannot think of anything useful to do with it besides setting the Safari bar to the same color as the body of the page, but that's already the default. If you don't specify a theme color, that's what Safari will do. So I think it should be okay. Then we include the CSS, the static CSS, the global CSS. This is the CSS that we will be defining over here on this file. And this is the local CSS. I will explain all of this later, but I do need to fix the type so it stops complaining. So I will say that these response locals have a CSS that is the response, no, the return type of local CSS. And I will do the same for JavaScript. I will explain this later. Then we import JavaScript, and this is something that I learned about last week, I think. This defer thing. It means that it will take my script tag, load it in parallel to the rest of the page, the rest of the head, the rest of the body, and only execute when the DOM has fully loaded. That's what it will do. And what's nice about this is that the DOM can load as soon as possible, and we can show something to the user as soon as possible. And this is in opposition to the default behavior, which is when the browser sees a script tag without defer, it will stop the world, go fetch the script, run the script, and then continue parsing the page. And that's because in theory, your script could be writing to the next line here. In your script, you could have a document.write that would create some DOM right here where the cursor is. And then your script would misbehave if you didn't follow this strict ordering that I mentioned. But with defer, it will run the script after having finished reading DOM. And that's much better because you show something to the user. And typically the JavaScript is going to do some decoration, some optional things on top of the DOM. So that's okay if it happens later. There's one more little thing that I have to do that I will grab from the layouts here. And that is to include this. But similar to that, I will explain this in the future. Now, we have this layout that doesn't do anything interesting, but it wires everything together, importing the scripts and everything. Let's use this layout here. Instead of just showing to do, we will show to do using the layout. The difference will be just right now you can see that the document is just the word to do. It doesn't have a head, it doesn't have anything else in the body, nothing interesting going on. Now let's use the template or the layout. The reason why I'm extracting the head, by the way, is so that I can give different titles to different pages. This page will just be Kill the Newsletter, but this page will have something about this. It will have something, probably this. Anyway, this will just be Kill the Newsletter for the homepage. And then TypeScript is complaining here because my request and response don't have the right response locals. This is just response locals logging. And this is response locals base. Well, response locals base needs to inherit from the response locals body. So response locals logging and this like that. And we need a middleware to actually initialize these two things. I don't think I have any kind of middleware for now. Well, we have the logging middleware, but that's it. So again, let's go to CourseLore and grab some stuff from there. Again, the plan being that I'm copying and pasting a lot because I'm trying to find, this is something I explained in a previous stream. I'm trying to find the things that are common across web applications so that I can extract them into some sort of library. And I think that this is the middleware that I want to import, but it's not going to be the only middleware. I will also want to import, we won't have anything to do with cookies because we don't have the notion of sessions or users. So we can skip this, but we will have forms and we don't have file uploads. So we don't need that. Okay. And I wonder if there was something else to the base. No, it was just CSS and JavaScript. Okay, all of that looks good to me. Let's look at the code that I just copied. It is a middleware. That's what this .use method is. It's a middleware. And perhaps the type should be above the middleware that will define these things. And I guess I will explain this at some other point. We'll probably get to it today, but not right now. And I will also not explain this right now. This I can explain right now because it's super simple. This is telling Express that we want to parse forms. When you submit a form and you click on this button, we want to parse that information that was submitted with the form. That's all there is to this line. This I will explain later. But with that, we can say that this is actually the response locals base. And then TypeScript stops complaining and the code should compile. And it compiled. And then we come here and we refresh. And we can see that, first of all, the to-do is now glued to the top left. And that's because we have much more going on here in the head. We have the doc type, we have the import for our CSS and JavaScript. And in the CSS, there is a whole design system and a whole reset that gets rid of the body margins. That's why now it's stuck to the top left. And there is even the title that we set. That's great progress. Hey, Fotis, what's up? I'm since you are here, unfortunately, I think we will have to postpone or skip the next meeting of the C++ study group. It was scheduled for the January 4th. I don't think I can make it. You can see that I'm streaming less often now, and I may have to stream less often in the future, and January 4th will probably be a bad day. We may have to skip and maybe do the week after that. Anyway, just so you know, I will, of course, coordinate and reschedule all the things in Discord. But heads up about that. All right, let's get to the skeleton of the page. The things that are the same, this layout thing. So let's try to get to a point where it looks like this, except that instead of the form, it says to do. So we can not worry about this part and come back here and write some HTML and blah, blah, blah in here. In order to do that, I will have to do one little trick. So this doesn't change anything. Before I had an arrow function that immediately returned this, and now I'm using the return keyword and braces. So that's nothing particularly interesting. And now I did this, where I introduced a variable that is just interpolating the given body, and then I use that variable here. Again, kind of uninteresting. I'm more or less just extracting a variable. But there are two things that I need to talk about. The first is kind of simple. Why am I using $2 ? That is part of a trick in my library. When I use $2 instead of $1 for interpolation, it means this is HTML that I have already sanitized. It's safe HTML. So include this HTML as is. Don't pretend that this is user data and try to escape it. Trust this. This is HTML to interpolate. So that's easy enough. But what's up with this variable? Well, now it's time for me to start explaining all this shenanigans. So let's do something like this. Let's do a div to surround our to-do. So if I save this and come back to the page and, well, wait for it to restart and reload, now there is a div surrounding the to-do keyword. Great. But if I want to style this div somehow, this is how you do styling with CSS using my library. It is reminiscent of inline styles, but it's implemented in a clever way that is not quite inline styles. So you have this CSS property that is added to the DOM, and then you use this local that was defined in the middleware, and then you use the tagged template literal for CSS, and then you do something in CSS like background color red. Now there is a lot to unpack here. Why am I doing all of this? I'm doing the layout body variable because I want this, in particular this function call, to have been evaluated before we get to this line. If I had that piece of code that lives here at this point, this line would have been evaluated first. That's not what I want. I want this line to be evaluated first. So that's why I'm extracting this into a variable to force an order of evaluation that I want. Otherwise, JavaScript, I think, guarantees a left to right order of evaluation. But now I'm forcing this because I'm extracting it into a variable. And the reason why I want for this function to run first is that it will register this CSS and it will give it a name. So if I refresh the page now, first of all, it worked. The background is red. Second of all, this CSS thing was registered under this weird combination of letters and numbers. And this here turned into dash that uses this combination of letters and numbers to assign the property that we wanted. So from a user's perspective, you write CSS like this, which is super natural. It looks like inline styles. And then your component is right next to the styles for your component, all this stuff that people love about the principle of locality and CSS in JS. But it's implemented in this little sneaky way. Anyhow, I find that writing CSS like this is super productive. I like it a lot. And it is also related to how people write Tailwind, except that you don't have to learn a bunch of weird class names. You can just write CSS, good old CSS. Oh, yeah. About the meeting. I don't have my light and microphone with me anyway, and we'll be back at my place on January 6th. Okay. Yeah. I will be in a different place, actually, and that's the reason why I will not be available. I will be moving on the 4th. Anyway. So now we have a way of styling things. Great. Oh, you know what I just noticed? I skipped the body tag. Yep, I skipped the body tag. I should have the body tag. The body tag is optional, but it's good practice to have it. So now we can start styling the body. If I do it like this, is it going to occupy the whole page? I forget, but I think so. Yes. So at this point, we can do some background color. And I think I will borrow some of the design decisions from course lore. I ask myself. Nah, let's do stuff from scratch. It's always fun. So the body will have a background color of... This is where the design system comes in. My library that allows you to define CSS in this manner also comes with a design system that gives you a bunch of colors to choose from. These are all the CSS variables that make up the design system. And this design system has been adapted from Tailwind. That's one of the things I like the most about Tailwind. I love two things about Tailwind: that it comes with the design system and that it allows you to define CSS right next to components. The thing that I don't like about Tailwind, obviously, is the fact that it relies on a bunch of custom classes, and if you ever want to deviate from the classes, it gets a bit awkward. And that's why I came up with my own library. Anyway, let's find the colors. And I could go with something gray, but I'm feeling like a color. I think I'm going to do a color. Yeah, the next version of Kill the Newsletter will be a bit more colorful. How about we go with... How about fuchsia? Just because it's so hard to write. And I think I'm going to start with the light theme. I always like to start with light and then adapt things to dark. Yeah, it's inoffensive. And as for the color of the text, we don't want pure black. We want, I want to say like 700. Let's see if this works. Nah. Oh, no, you know what? I don't want to have to revisit this file. Well, it's an SVG. It's not the end of the world. I was going to say that I don't want to revisit this file, and this file defines things in black and white. Black for when you're on the light theme, or white when you're on the dark theme. But where is this color even defined? I think it's just using the current color, isn't it? Inheriting the color from the environment. If I set color to blue, no. Yeah, it's not defining the color at all. I will have to revisit this file and make it fuchsia. Maybe fuchsia is not the best option. We can easily replace this later. Let's move on. Let's do the dark colors real quick. And that's how I do my colors usually. I start with light, I do a media query, and then I define the dark theme. Right now, without me touching anything, it's still on the light theme, but now that I save, you will see that it changes to be dark. We are probably not going to fly with fuchsia. I don't like it. But anyway, what I wanted to do was to show you first my approach for doing different color schemes, but also to show you the power of doing things like this. Using the library, you can just do a media query right here. That is super powerful when designing. I like it a lot. Now that we have this, let's try and find a color that isn't as offensive. So fuchsia is not doing it for me. Is amber better? Amber is nice. How about sky? How about cyan? Cyan is, I can get behind this. How about teal? Teal is nice. Teal should be cool. I think I'm gonna go with cyan. These are the colors that come with Tailwind, by the way. If I was really invested, I would probably try and find a palette of 4 Kill the Newsletter. I would come up with a palette for Kill the Newsletter, but I don't think it's worth it. So now that we have this, perhaps this color is a bit too white. Let's play around in the browser directly. No. No, 50 is the right choice here. Right. Next thing. You love fuchsia? Well, I changed it to cyan. I hope you can get behind cyan. It's less in your face. So yeah, the next thing I want to do is something that I tried to do when I was designing this version, but failed because I didn't know better. But what I wanted to do was to have this centralized, if possible, if the viewport is big enough, centralized vertically. If the viewport is not big enough, for instance, on this page, then scroll. And for the love of me, I could not get that to work. But now I think I know how to do it. You're cool with cyan too. It's great for chill looking designs. Awesome. So here's how you do this. First, instead of just one to do, let's paste a lot of text here because we need the thing to scroll. Or maybe not. Let's start with to do and then do the scrolling bit. I will commit now because we are going to start exploring this whole layout situation. So one thing that we can do is we can display flex to get into Flexbox. And then we can justify content center. You know what? I'm going to do this in the browser. I'm going to do this in the browser so I can show you what all of this is going to do. So I have my body here. And first thing I have to do is to make the body occupy the whole viewport at least. As you can see right now, it's not occupying the whole viewport. It's just occupying this line. See how only the line is highlighted? So I will do the mean height is 100%. If the body overflows because it is bigger, there is more content than there is space, then okay. But if not, then at least it should occupy the whole height of the page. And it's not. Oh, come on. Yeah, that's not gonna fly. View height, this unit of measurement, is not a good unit of measurement because the view height may change, like when you are on the phone and you start scrolling, part of the user interface goes away, so the view height changes. So this unit of measurement is no good. Here's what we need to do. We need to take a step back. I'll take a step back and deal with this issue a bit later. You gotta love CSS. So let's do the display flex stuff that I started doing. You display flex, nothing changes because by default it's gonna flex to the top left anyway. Then we justify content to the center, and then it's centered horizontally. And then we align items to the center, and it centers the item vertically with respect to this purple box that we have going on, because that's the height of the body so far. So it is vertically centered, but I would like it to vertically center to the page, not to the little height of the body. So to do that, we need to fix the problem that I started fixing. Let's just paste this now. Now, the solution for the problem that we are running into is that we would like the body to be occupying the whole page. And we could have a mean height of 100 view heights. What the fuck? Did I just do this and it worked? Oh, I said mean width here. There you go. So with this, the to-do is now centered vertically with respect to the whole page. The problem is mobile. The parts of the interface will change, and then this will change, and then 100 view heights may be more than the whole viewport. It's a mess. I don't like using this unit of measurement. So what I will do instead is a little trick. I will let the body be a wrapper. And this is, by the way, how I tend to design my stuff. I tend to play around with this interactively here, and I like how I can just click and drag this and whatnot. And then when I find stuff I like, I copy and paste. I find this actually very productive. Anyway, I will let the body be a wrapper. And the thing I just did where I introduced a div and moved the CSS inwards doesn't change anything. The result is still the same when I refresh the page. The div is still occupying just that portion of the page. But now comes the trick. The body, I will set it to what is the name of the property I'm thinking about? The value is absolute. It's position. Position absolute. And now this takes the body out of the flow of the page, the natural flow of the page. But then I'm going to stretch the body so it occupies the whole viewport. It is going to occupy the viewport. So it is not going, the body itself is not going to scroll. The body is going to, when I move like this, the body is going to resize as well. And it's always going to be occupying the viewport. To do that, the most compatible way of doing this, the way that works in every browser, is kind of silly. You have to say, anchor the body to the top, anchor the body to the right, anchor the body to the bottom, and anchor the body to the left. And now the body, when I highlight the body tag, you can see that it occupies the whole page, the whole viewport. And with that, we now have an anchor, so to speak. Before, when we tried to do just height of 100%, it didn't know 100% with respect to what, but now it does. If I go inside, so now the body is occupying the whole page. If I go inside this div and I say that that should have a mean height of 100%, this 100% is with respect to the body that has been anchored to the viewport. And now that works. Where the heck is my mean height? Why is it not showing here? Oh well. Now, what's interesting about this wrapper trick is that this has an anchor, and this is going to stretch. So at least it will occupy the whole viewport, so it's going to be centralized. Great. But as the content grows, I have a scrolling situation, exactly what I wanted. So if my content is short, it is centered vertically. Probably this page will be centered vertically. As the content grows, it will scroll. It will grow, occupy the whole page, and then start scrolling. And that's the behavior I wanted all along. Hooray. And it's not so hard to do either, but you do have to think outside the box. Okay, let's start putting stuff in this box. I don't want this box to be too wide, so I will put a lot of content in here, so we have a lot of content to work with. Yeah, just copying and pasting like this is no good because there may be interpolation in there. I know that Visual Studio Code has some Lorem Ipsum extensions, but I, for whatever reason, keep doing things like this. Cool. So I don't want the page to be this wide. I want to set a maximum width. I think I can do this directly on this. I don't think I need another wrapper. We'll see. No, that did not work. Right, because the flex container is being shrunk with the max width. So for that, I will need to introduce yet another wrapper. And in here, I can say what the maximum width of this element should be. So to keep things straight, we have a body that is anchored to the viewport. Then we have this div that will be at least as high as the viewport, and it can scroll. So you can think of like a frame, that's the body, and then you can think of a picture that can scroll in the frame, that's this first GIF, and then whatever is inside this GIF, because remember it is flex and it's justify center, align center. So whatever is in this scrolling pane is centralized. And the thing that is in this scrolling pane is the next GIF. And this one is something that has a maximum width. So it doesn't grow beyond the boundaries. And with that, we have a behavior that is more like this. Except that if the thing is small, it will be vertically centered. This is a lot of shenanigans, but for historical context, if you were to try and do something like what I'm doing in terms of layout before Flexbox, you would have to do it in JavaScript. There was just no way to do it without JavaScript. The heavy thing here is the display flex. This is the line that is all the magic, really. Anyhow, so we have a maximum width, and then the first thing we will have, we actually want some margin above so it doesn't touch the top like that. So I think it's fair if I just do the margin here. And I think I will probably want something like, for the top and bottom, let's do 4. Yeah, and for the sides, let's do 2. And I'm being very specific. I don't want the body to have a margin. The body needs to occupy the whole viewport, and I don't want this scrolling pane to have a margin. I want the contents of the scrolling pane to have a margin. Because I don't want the scroll bar to start up here, for instance. No, I want the scroll bar to go all the way to the bottom. The scrolling pane is the whole body, just like that. All right, I don't know about you all, but this is my jam. I love doing these kinds of puzzles with CSS. I really like it. And the reason why I put some lateral margins here, some margins on the sides here, is that if your viewport is too narrow, then that's the kind of margin you get on the sides. Alrighty. I think that may be all in terms of layout, really. Well, there is one thing I noticed about my current layout, which I think I will continue to do, which is everything is centralized. And that's because there is not a lot of text, and I think it kind of makes sense to present it like this. So I think I will bite the bullet and apply this rule right here, which is kind of a mindset that I think I have changed since my previous version of Kill the Newsletter, by the way, which is instead of trying to define the spacing and positioning of things in the things, I try to do that in the container as much as it is possible. And I think that this mindset is super powerful because typically if you see a layout like this, you may resort to something like a paragraph with text align center. And that's all fine. But when you think about the position of things, I find it much harder to make the decisions for each element. I find it makes more sense to do something like what we are going to do, which is we are going to first do some dummy content and then I will show you. So let's get rid of this because we know that the scrolling situation works as we wanted. And let's do a bunch of paragraphs. So what we will do is we will look at the container and say that the container of the paragraphs will be a display flex. The flex direction is going to be column. So we are kind of back to where we started, but we are going to put a gap. And let's say that this gap is like 4, maybe 2. It's 2. And let's say also that the align items is center. Now this will not make a change because all the paragraphs are too long, but let's make one paragraph short and you'll see what difference this makes. And some people will say that I am abusing flex, that I should be relying on the natural flow of the document. But I kind of like the fact that the gap here is dictated by the container, so it is consistent across the contained elements. This is not always the best option for vertical rhythm, but it is a good place to start. So that's why I like to do it this way. And also, besides all this, I also think that the paragraphs themselves should be text align center, which kind of defeats the whole exercise, but there you have it. So let's take all that and apply it to this. And I tend to have a logic when defining my CSS. I tend to go with things like text, font, colors first, then positioning, then stuff that affects children like display. So min height affects the box, display affects the children. And in here, I will start with stuff that has to do with text, then stuff that has to do with the box, and I go from inside out, so width first, margin second. The order would be width, padding, border, margin, offset. Then stuff that affects children. So display flex, flex direction, gap, align center. And for this, I don't really care about the order, but that's my style. I tend to go from, I guess, the inside out. Yeah, I would say from the inside out and then children. It makes sense to me. Okay, this is a good place. Now let's do this title. In fact, this is a good place. I'm going to commit what we have, because we did the bulk of the work on the layout itself. And these lines are not trivial, or at least they weren't trivial to me when I first had this problem. One thing you will notice about my design system and my reset and whatnot is that I don't have default styles for anything. So I don't have colors. Sorry, yeah, I didn't have colors. I don't have a cursor. This is a link, but a hand doesn't show on the link. And the font is the default. The color doesn't change when I hover. There is no underline. It is a CSS reset, really. So we'll have to style all of this. I think I'm going to just do the font because I think that's a low-hanging fruit, and then we are going to leave more stuff for the next session. I think we have installed a font. We decided on JetBrains Mono? Right. Go Leandro from the past. let's do JetBrains Mono. So what I'm gonna do is here on the body, specify a font. And as I mentioned, I do font stuff at the top. So my font family. I also have to define that in the prepare file. And I think I already did. Huh? Yay, Leandro from the past. There you go. The font size is a bit ridiculous. Let's experiment with this in the browser. Oh yeah, we should have a fallback. And now to the font size. I think I'm gonna go with extra small. If you think about it, it is kind of ridiculous that my default font size is extra small, but I find that the Tailwind font size is always too large. And oh, maybe it is because I am using my display in a different resolution. So yeah, this is kind of that same size, and that may be too small. No, I think it's gonna be fine. Because this is a mono-spaced font, and because it is JetBrains Mono, it has a tall X height. So I think that this extra small is good enough. And I find that I often need to go beyond the scale below to the smaller and smaller sizes in my designs. Do you think that designers design things too small? Sometimes they do. I'm trying not to fall into that trap though. Anyway, I think that this is a good place to stop. Next time we'll be looking at how to do the rest of the layout. We will be styling the links. We may even do some kind of animation like this. It is always cool. And we will do the logo. This is simple stuff. Get to the form. It will be a lot of fun. And I mention all this as the next time we work on Kill the Newsletter, because we will be working on something else on the next coding session, which I think will be on Thursday. And we will probably be doing, I want to say JS effects. We are probably going to be doing some digital signal processing next time, but we may get to the data bending stuff because I'm also excited about that. All right. Thank you, Bo. I really appreciate you joining me. Means a lot to me. Thank you, Fotis, M9, and Nod was 1. Thank you all for being here on the chat with me. Thank you to everyone else who is watching this now or in the future. I really appreciate you being here. I see you again probably on Thursday for something else that is going to be cool. Enjoy. Take care of yourselves. Have a good week up to Thursday probably. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.